This is Tom, and welcome back to Bryn Mawr RC. This week we're continuing our work on the Land Rover Defender 90 CC01 kit from Tamiya. And components that we're working on this week include a little bit of rework from steps 21 and 22 and the dampers. Secondly, we'll be working on kit instructions number 23, which is checking out RC electrical equipment, doing a little pre-test. And step 24, which is attaching the steering servo. But anyway, so I'm glad you made it today. Oh, and one other thing, we have a little sneak peek to our future body work. The Tamiya polycarbonate paint came in. This is Tamiya PS61 metallic orange. So although I've always been showing this Defender 90 in green, and that's normally what you see, I don't want to do green, and I'm going to go for metallic orange. So anyway, enough sneak peek on the paints, and let us move forward to the rework of step 21 and 22. That particular rework was on the dampers, and what I effectively did, it was a very small change. I removed the damper spring pretensioners. If you recall from our last video, this is the pretensioner, and you may recall, I think in the first video, I had my list of CC01 build requirements, and I neglected to go back and refer to that every week. And under the dampers, shocks, and springs, I was going to not install these pretensioners, as that was a feedback from some RCers on YouTube and out in discussion forums. And that this was another way to make the suspension on the CC01 a little softer. Moving on to step 23, this is where we check the RC equipment before we install it. What you see laid out in front of you are the components that will be going into the car. We have the kit provided electronic speed controller here. My particular kit had the Tamiya brushless electronic speed controller, or TBLE025. So you can't see it very well, but this is the speed controller that was provided in the kit. That speed controller has an on and off button wired to it. You see that I have it plugged into battery. All of my batteries and equipment are quite old, so this battery is probably 15 years old, and nothing too fancy here, just a nickel metal hydride. You also see Servo. This is, again, a servo that I've had probably 15 years, and it's a Futaba S3003. And then you see that wired into my receiver. The radio equipment I have is also rather old. It is a synthesized FM transmitter and receiver, but you can see the receiver here, and again, it is a JR Racing RS300. I just have one receiver, and the transmitter that I have used, and is quite old as well, is just a JR Racing XS3. Again, synthesized FM transmitter that does three functions. So steering, speed, and then it has an auxiliary function if your model has some other function to control. So in this step, we just verify that all the equipment is working before we put it into the model. The servo plugs into channel 1 on the receiver, and the ESC, I always say ECS, the ESC, the electronic speed controller, plugs into channel 2 or function 2 of the receiver. So let's just give this a quick little test. In RC, you always turn the transmitter on first. Transmitter on. Here's the voltage of the batteries that are in the unit itself, so we got a good strong voltage. And then we turn on the ECS and ESC, and all we're doing here is verifying that for now we're not plugged into the electric motor. We're just verifying that we're getting power to the ESC. The ESC is able to communicate with the receiver as well as the servo communicating with the receiver, and of course my transmitter and receiver talking to one another. And so we'll just, you can hear that, I assume. Let me get it out of the way. And you can see my little servo. I taped a little white piece of paper. And indeed, we are getting proper communications between the transmitter and the receiver, and that's sending that proper pulses to the servo. Moving on to step 24, we're going to install the servo. Again, this model has one servo that is for steering. So let's go ahead and begin. I've got the components out that we need. Okay, so the next part is actually the servo, which you can't see. So for now, I'm just going to leave the servo plugged in, so I don't have to take it apart. This step asks that the servo be placed into its neutral spot, which I don't know any other better way of doing this other than putting the servo horn back on and just checking. So this is max one way. This is max one way. And that's max the other way. I'm going to say that neutral is about right there. Okay. So that's a neutral position for the servo. It's having us install the servo, the mechanisms for the servo. Okay, ball joint on. There we go. Now again, the steering mechanism on a CC01 is pretty bad. And this is stock. I'm not changing that now. Maybe I'll change it in the future. Here's the steering servo, the ball joint pointing down, and then the linkage that we just created will clip onto there. Okay, let's see where we go from here. So let's go ahead and get ready to attach. Okay, so the servo is actually connected to the steering mechanism now. But let's take a look. That is it. We put in 3 washers and 3 screws, and we put on the servo mechanism. So there we have it. There is the end of step 24. Continuing on to step 25 is the attachment to the model of the ESC and the receiver. And that's done with this little plastic piece, I think called E1. So let's go ahead and work on that. This gets attached to the model, and then the receiver and the ESC gets double side stuck onto it. Nothing too fancy. So that is going to be just like this. Can you see? My receiver. I'm just going to put that whole chunk on there. Okay, then here's a recap of everything we did. I haven't done any cable management or cleaned it up yet, but it is the way it looks. As you can see here, we have the ESC installed, the receiver installed, installed the power switch here, down here. I lost that footage in my camera. I temporarily just have my antenna cable strung there. Again, need to do some cable management. But let's go ahead and plug this in and just give it a look-see. But I also lost some footage with my camera. Guess I need a new one. Is the actual process of setting up the ESC. But that's simply following instructions. So let's give this a try, see how it looks. As we know, receiver on first. Transmitter on first, then receiver. You can see I have some steering there. Turning to the right is not looking very good. I still have to verify that steering. I get very little wheel movement when I go right. Quite a bit more when I go left. One thing I did off camera is when I placed on the servo for its neutral setting was not correct, so I had to, as it was all wired up, loosen up the servo horn and move it such that it was better. What else did we do here? That was about it. And here we can see me giving a little And I would say for now we're doing pretty well, except the steering when turning to the right. I'm going to have to play around a little bit more down here or on the servo, or look online to see is it really that bad. Anyway, thank you for staying with me to the end of the video. This is Tom. I appreciate you joining me. Hope to see you next week on Bryn Mawr RC. Thank you. Bye.